Welcome to Notes from the Underground with your host, Deborah Jane East, and commentaries by myself, Derek Tyler. Nothing is really as it seems these days. In order to get to the bottom line, you have to go underground, where men and women search for answers, risking their lives to bring you the truth.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Deborah Jane East, and we are on Notes from the Underground. And it's a beautiful evening here in Washington, and it's no surprise that you've heard me speak before about BRET OLDHAM's books. I read them last year, and they were so enlightening, so detailed. You really just felt like he was sitting there, you know, you're drinking a cup of coffee, and he's just telling it to you as it happens. He has such a way with words and how he describes everything. But I want to tell you a little bit about him here first, and then we'll get into the show. BRET OLDHAM is a well-known alien abductee and paranormal investigator. He is known for his abduction experiences, his work with other abductees, and his EVP and spirit box work and research. BRET is the author of the acclaimed Amazon bestseller, Children of the Greys, in which he details his lifelong alien abduction experiences, and his latest book is The Baby Takers, which I highly recommend. This book, I still refer to it. It's got some of the best details and information that you're going to find. But BRET also has been a public speaker and has been a guest speaker for Nevada MUFON, Texas MUFON, California MUFON, Paramania, Octagon Hall, Kentucky, Paranormal Study Center, Huntsville, Alabama, Fayetteville Arts Center, which I have been, and Tennessee, and other ghost groups and things like that. And this is such a pleasure to do because knowing your work so well, you just paint such a vivid picture, and I always enjoy when I get to interview people like this, and it's just really great. I want to thank you for agreeing to be my guest.
Thanks so much, Deborah, and appreciate you having me on. It's always nice to do a show with somebody as informed like you are and is actually familiar with my work.
Well, it's a pleasure because not too often do you get to read such a detailed event of something that's normally kept secret, you know, for a long time. And the first thing I want to say to you is thank you for your honesty. Things you did not have to deal with, but you did, and you address them in your book very humbly and with true honesty. And I, for one, being also an abductee, I really appreciate that because I found out some of the things that I thought were, you know, unique to me. It turns out that they're being repeated over and over again in people like yourself and other abductees. So it's very enlightening. Well, I know all of this had to start somewhere. Can you tell us what made you think, first of all, that something wasn't right in your life, that maybe you were having strange dreams or something? Can you tell us how it really all started and what happened that you were able to find out what it really was?
Sure. Yeah, it actually started with me when I was 5 years old, and I was living in a farm in southern Illinois. Hadn't been exposed to anything regarding aliens or anything like that. I mean, back in those days, my family was real religious. You know, we just had a small little black and white television, and nobody talked about anything to do with paranormal or aliens or anything. You know, everything was sort of just blamed on the devil.
I remember those days well. I'm from the South.
Okay. And, you know, this was southern Illinois, about 15 minutes from the Kentucky line. So, and we lived out on a farm. It was you know, had to go down a gravel road just to get to it, and just surrounded by cornfields and soybean fields, and I had just up until that time led a pretty sheltered life, really, and we lived in a two-story farmhouse, and it was an unusual kind of building. This house, where the staircase was actually in the middle of the house, and you could shut a door, and actually close off the upstairs, and so
wow.
They would. My mom and stepdad would do that to save on heating and stuff in the wintertime. So in the late fall, they had moved my brother and my sister and myself downstairs into like this big open family room, and we sort of just stayed down there. We actually slept on the floor. My brother and I did. They just sort of made like a put a bunch of quilts down, and that was our mattress. And my sister had the luxury of sleeping on the sofa. And so that was the circumstances. And there's no street lights out there, nothing. It's just, if you've ever been out in the country like that, it's just you have the ambient noise and whatever moonlight, if it's a clear night coming through, and that's pretty much all the lighting that you have. And in the middle of the night, I started hearing, which I thought was my stepdad at the time. I was just a small boy, and it was a voice waking. It woke me up, and I sat up and I looked around, and I couldn't see. There was no one there. I thought my stepdad was calling me. It wasn't him. And yet I noticed this really bright light coming through the side of the house. The front one is at the side of the house, which was of course unusual because, like I said, there was no lighting out. There was no street lights or anything like that. I wasn't had the least bit of fear because I didn't really have anything to even go on. There was just a strange light. And then I kept hearing this voice coaxing me to come to the window, and I was just a curious child, and I got up and walked across the cold hardwood floor, and instead of going to the window where the light was actually the brightest that was coming through, there was an adjacent window in front of the house. For some reason, I went to that window instead, and we didn't have blinds, didn't really need them. There was like these white, wispy, willowy curtains, and so I walked up to the window, took my right hand and started pulling the curtains back. And when I did, that moment changed my life forever, because on the other side of the window was what we now know as typical gray, small gray. And I had never, there was nothing even in my mind to compare it to. I had no idea it was standing a foot and a half in front of me, and before I could scream, react, do anything, I was gone. And I did see two other ones standing back. We had a big oak tree in the front yard, and they were standing about 15 or 17 feet, something like that, back by the tree. And the next thing I know, I opened my eyes and I was on a craft on a table surrounded by these hideous-looking creatures. I was calling for my mom, screaming for my mom, help, and no help was coming. And then they actually must have drew images from my mind, and I started seeing them as doctors with surgical masks on. I guess they were trying to calm me down, and that didn't work. But eventually,
Were you frightened? Scared, or?
Yeah, just out of my mind, scared, because I had no idea what was happening to me, and of course I'm 5 years old, and they eventually got me calmed down, and I don't remember any procedures that were done at that time, but I do remember being taken to a part of the craft that where it was this half moon sitting area, and it was all built into the craft, which I found this time after time. Most of the stuff on these crafts are part of the craft itself, and with the grays especially, everything seems to be rounded. They don't like stairs. They don't like sharp edges and stuff. And this was like it's sort of these layers of seats in a half moon, kind of up against the wall, and there was more of the grays. But I noticed that there was a taller one, and they set me down by the tall one, and I could hear him telepathically, but of course I didn't know what it was at the time, and that was confusing me. But I would speak out loud, and he was actually befriending me. He was telling me just the usual stuff. They weren't going to hurt me, and he was trying to become my friend basically. And given the circumstances, it did help because at least one of these creatures was being nice to me, and that was the first meeting I had with the tall gray. Who I had many subsequent meetings after that. That was the first experience I had. One, and I come back. They didn't try to suppress my memories or anything. Like the first time I come back, I woke up the next morning. I told my mom about the little men who came and got me, and typically, as so many parents out there do, she just laughed it off. And It was shortly after that I had a second incident at the house, where this time they had coaxed me out of what we call a mud room. And I walked out on this little porch, which wasn't very big, it's a concrete porch. And I remember as a child, like standing at the top of this porch, maybe, like a foot and a half high, and they were still on the ground. And I remember feeling so tall because I was like above them at that point, because they were so small. And that time they actually, I wasn't really as much, the fear factor hadn't taken over the second time. And they loaded me across the field, and that's how I remember the incident. I don't remember what happened after that, but those were the first initial memories. And I think after there was an incident at home where they had, my mom had been telling us kids about the Wizard of Oz, and she was really hyping us. We're going to watch this movie. You guys will love it. And we all sat down as a family one night, doing a little black and white TV to watch Wizard of Oz, and I was really enjoying it. And then the scene come on with the flying monkeys, and kidnapping Dorothy and Toto, and I just freaked out and just really started crying and had a really severe reaction to it. Ran out of the room, and my mom couldn't understand what was going on. And of course, it had to trigger what had happened to me, with the small little beings and stuff. And that was after that incident. All my memories were erased at that point. And I went on. I quit talking about my little guy that came and got me and all that. And I went basically all through childhood and teen years. Although I had classic signs, chronic nosebleeds. I was really drawn to. I was always telling my cousins, talking about looking up at the sky, talking about. I became really interested in alien stuff, even though I had no idea why. But I also began to experience a lot of paranormal activity, hauntings, and things of that nature, which I now and I explain pretty clearly. Really, I touch on in both books, but very clearly, Still in the Grace, the correlation between high incidence paranormal and abductees, and what my theory is on that. And but it wasn't until I was in my early 20s when it all began to surface, which maybe it happens to be like this. And I know I've talked, I counsel a lot of people, and it usually surfaces symptoms similar to PTSD. And I began to have severe anxiety issues, panic attacks. I got so bad I became agoraphobic. And I was an athlete when I was younger, so I was in front of crowds. And at that time I was a professional musician, so I was playing in front of people. And I got to the point where I didn't even want to leave the house. And I couldn't figure out what was happening or a reason behind it. And it ended up in therapy. And in fact, I took 2 therapists. The second one, we had a breakthrough. And when the memories began to surface, I didn't even tell him. This is the sad part about this whole phenomena, is how secret everybody has to be about it. And I denied it myself. I think we all go through these stages like that. And the first is usually denial, because I didn't want to believe that this kind of stuff was happening to me, or had happened to me previously, or was currently happening.
Exactly.
And I just had a hard time accepting it. But it's sort of like, and I tell people, and any of your listeners are out there, it's like, if you think you've had an experience and your life is going fine, I would recommend leave it be, because once you open the door, you can't go back.
You can't go back. I've heard others say that. I agree with you.
And you don't know what's going to come through. Everybody remembers different parts, some more than others. And some people say that about me. It's like, well, how do you remember so much? Well, I'm in my 50s now, so I've had a lot of experiences, and I would probably only remember 15% maybe. So it's really not that much, considering how long off and on that I've been taking. And I just think some of them are too traumatic to actually remember. I have scars, stuff on my body, unexplainable scars. I've had numerous doctors look at. I put photos of them in the book that can't be explained, and I have no idea how I got them. But I think it's one of those things that it's too much. Your subconscious kind of protects you. But
I agree.
When I got through the therapy, I never did. I never did tell the therapist what was happening. But it began sort of a healing process when it was all starting to come out. And so I started really working on myself with mental techniques that he had taught me and different relaxation. And I got heavily into meditation, and which I still am, and things like that. And tried to, even at one point, I studied hypnosis in order, it's kind of comical now when I look back on it, but I actually believe that if I strengthened my mind enough, that I would be able to break the mind control that these beings have on us, and thus they would leave me alone. And of course, that was really a naive assumption on my part, but I did try it, to try to make it stop, and to no avail. I don't think it's possible. I know there's arguments out there about that. I don't think it's possible to make it stop.
It's really hard for people to understand unless it has happened to them, and you never can forget it after that. Just it's invisible chains, just not letting you even turn your head. You just have to be a puppet, and no one can understand unless it's happened to them.
Exactly, and it is. It's a lot for people to wrap their heads around, and the fear of it being true is too much for most, and that's why it makes it difficult to go public. Because there's still that tinfoil hat stigma that's associated with it, and yet I can tell you from the number of people that I've talked to privately, and I won't, but it goes. I mean, I lived in Nashville for a while. I mean, there's a really famous country star that's an experiencer that will never go public, that I know about. But it's all walks of life. I mean, everybody. There's no discrimination on who you are in our society to them. It's really, especially as far as the Greys go, you got the genetics that they're looking for, and a lot of times it runs in family lines, as most of us know. And they're going to make sure that it stays in that family line, even through mind control manipulation. And that, to me, is one of the scariest facets of the whole phenomena, is their ability to control us, even through implants. And I didn't talk about that a whole lot in Children of the Greys, but I definitely got into it in Baby Greys. And that's something that we live sort of double lives, I think, where I don't know if you find that out, but you have to sort of function in society. And when you went public like I have, and I did television in several different countries, and so you're exposing yourself to a lot of people, and ever so often somebody recognizes that and recognizes you, and then you never know what the reaction is. And so you sort of
You're right. You're exactly right. Sometimes I've had people just like roll their eyes at me and go, "Well, yeah." And she's from the South too, And when I first opened up my office in Pilot Mountain, the newspaper was by in 2 days. Like, UFOs, really?
Right,
So
right.
I totally understand what you're talking about. You know what I like so much about your books is you talked about so many ways that as a child these encounters affected you. Like, you talked about the flashbacks. What are some other ways that you can look back at now and say, well, hey, maybe that's why I wasn't able to sleep good, or this and that? Do you have any
Yeah.
other memories of
Yeah.
how it affected you?
Yeah, I think it completely changed my life, because um, even though I didn't even know it at the time, um, what all these things that were happening to me. One of the odd things about me is that I only began to recognize as I became an adult was hell. There's a lot of negative stuff about being taken But there's also, I've tried to draw positives from it in order to be able to cope, and I talk about that when I speak publicly or if I counsel somebody. It's like, because otherwise this stuff will do you in, mentally especially, and so you can't become a victim to it, and you have to draw positives of it. And one of the positives that I drew was, um, I've had like really, really good health. I just got a physical again about a month ago, and every time my blood work comes by, they're just like blown away, because every if I change doctors, I just moved down here, coast in Alabama, so I had to change doctors, and this guy was the same thing. But I've never seen blood work. Um, and so I've been told that numerous times throughout my life, and I really attribute that to, I do lead a pretty healthy, clean life, but at the same time, I think that they kept me healthy, just for their own agenda. It's not just, it was supposed them to keep me healthy as well, because I'm apparently the kind of stock, that they like, and I don't mean to sound crude about it, but in essence, that's what we are to them, especially for the grades, that's the hybrid program. And so, but I've benefited from it as well, and you have to look at it like that. And other things that's changed, I think major percentage of people, especially who've had multiple experiences, they come back, they garner some sort of heightened psychic awareness. And I hesitate to use the word psychic because there's so many fake psychics out there, um, and yet there is the real thing. And I have noticed time and time again that people that have had multiple experiences, especially, they develop psychic abilities in some capacity. Sometimes it's not always the same thing, and I'm no different. And that's another thing I try to reject, mostly because of the strict religious upbringing that I had. But I ended up rejecting that also as I got older, and that's a sort of another positive thing, I think, because had I not had these experiences, it changes your whole perspective. You know what I mean? It changes your whole perspective of the way you look at the world, and your place in it, and your other inhabitants of the planet. And I think most of us become altruistic, and you start caring about the planet, you start caring about. I'm a huge animal advocate, things like that, and I think that's all result of going through these experiences. It changes the way you look at spirituality. I've found for myself that I started questioning just regular dogmatic organizing of religion, and I wasn't getting the answers, so I started looking out into other things, which I also, because I was having these experiences, like, I know we are not the supreme beings of the universe, I can tell you we're not even close, and man's own ego has a hard time with that, and that's another thing why this subject is so taboo, even in this day and age, because it could possibly change people's religious views. Should people say, and you probably heard this, where they were like, well, I'll believe it, when an alien lands, when they land on the White House lawn and
yes,
I've
heard that.
Yeah, we've all heard that. It's like, and I was like, well, what if they did have a press conference, and it doesn't matter. The Greys aren't the only ones that's coming here, but I'm just keep using them because that's most of my experiences are with them. But say, they have a press conference and they've announced this, and of course, in my opinion, it would already be total chaos if Brett broken loose. But if you have a Gray up there and some reporter says, what is the true religion on earth? And he says, none. You're all wrong. You know what I mean? It's like anything like that. My gosh, it would be catastrophic. And
I agree, because the things that the people freak out in public right now are just so minimal, about someone's hairstyle or their weight or, different things like that. I just can't even imagine what it would do to society if something like that happened for real.
Yeah, and I catch a lot of flack in the UFO community about disclosure, uh, because I'm just not on board with it. You know,
But you know what? You are disclosure. We are disclosure. The abductees, the people who have had hands-on experience with them. The rest of the world is the ones that need to catch up. That's how I look at it.
you're 100% correct. Um, I've been approached by whatever you want to call it. You know, the black op people, um, who told me exactly that. They knew who I was. Told me a bunch of information, some of which I talk about in Baby Takers, uh, and also told me keep up the good work. You know, they know that what anybody that goes public and talks about this, or just like what you're doing with your radio show, and you bring more awareness to the public, we are disclosure. You know, this stuff, this whole movement that we're going to convince our government to admit that they've been lying to us for decades. It's just asinine, and I can't get behind it, and I don't think the public is ready for it. They have to get acclimated. It's a slow process, and because it's going to be a revolutionary change, and it's going to be on alien terms, whether it's the Greys, Nordics, reptilians, you know, whoever, because there is multiple species that's been coming for a very long time here. Um, but it'll be on their terms. You know, it's not going to be on the American government or any other government's terms. And um, the people that are coming out, like myself, we're doing them a favor. You know, and I do not blame the American government for hiding what they know, because I just don't think the American public is 100% ready for it yet.
Well, I don't think they are either, because there has been so much that has been kept from us. We have no way of even comprehending, for instance, that something they might release tomorrow, something that they can do. I remember when microwaves came out, microwave ovens. I remember when cell phones came out, all this different stuff. But when they introduce these things to the public, they've been already using them for 30, 40 years or more.
Oh, sure.
They have access to so much technology that has been kept from the American people and made the American people pay for the research and to hide all their activities. I think we should have the option of knowing. I don't think that America can really accept what they've had to do to keep it like this. I mean, you know, I'm a fan of John Lear, and he was talking about how some people that had saw extraterrestrials or a crash or saw things that they weren't supposed to, they would take them in this location, and it was like a little town they had created for them until there was almost 1,000 people there. They didn't get to tell anybody where they left, what happened to them. There's also been researchers that have been killed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's really sad. Those are the things that I think will always haunt me, and that's why I think they will never publicly announce it, because they've got their hands in the cookie jar.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's got to come out in its own way. Yeah, John's a friend of mine. I've known him. You know, I used to live in Vegas for a long time, and since the late '80s. He's actually one of the first people that I told about my experiences when I realized what was happening.
He's such a cool guy, isn't he? He's so cool.
Very supportive, and you know, I don't agree with everything he says, but he has proven himself correct many times over. And I know a lot of people, just don't know what to make of him. but
it's certainly shocking. I know right now he's got everybody shook up because he's talking about that the moon has millions and millions of people, you know, already inhabiting it, and so he's got quite a bit stirred up about that.
Yeah. I last time I talked to him, well, it's been a good couple of years now, and that's what he was talking about. That's exactly what he was talking about. It was a lot to absorb, but you know, he's kind of a character, but he's also sort of like crazy like a fox type of guy, you know.
I agree. I tell you, I love hearing him tell some of his stories, and he's had some wild adventures in those planes, let me tell you, because everybody knows that his father was the owner of Learjet, and you can just imagine all the flying experiences he had before he even got his license. I'm sure he has things that would make our toes curl. But what's so interesting about him is he worked for one of the alphabet agencies,
Right.
and he learned how to gather information, how to dig to find out, like where an underground military base might be, what kind of craft they were experimenting with. I mean, he's very, very knowledgeable. And yeah, some of his stuff is really off the wall. But I never say never. I just sort of tuck it away and say, well, maybe something else will come out by another person one day and it'll click with me. But he's definitely not boring, is he? So that's great that you and him were friends. He's a character indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, I was around when all that stuff with Bob Lazar and George Knapp broke all that, and it was pretty exciting times back in the Vegas days. Of course, we all found taps on our phones and all that stuff.
Exactly.
But that just kind of goes with the territory. I don't care anymore. They can listen all they want, which I'm sure they do.
I know, and I can't even, back when I was 15 and 16, if someone told me that we would have cell phones where we could see the people when we talked to them and played movies and music, I would have thought, wow, that sounds like something on Star Trek or something, I can't imagine that. Yeah, the Jetsons. I used to love the Jetsons. Oh man, we're close in age. That's why we know so much about this.
Yeah. Some young
Those
people,
were the good old days.
Young people won't know what we're talking about, will they?
I know. Well, I think they were all good. We grew up in a good time. Well, from hearing your experiences as a child and now you talking as an adult, I can see you sort of lean that the Greys really have a hidden agenda. It's not exactly what we think, is it?
I don't think anyone knows with 100% certainty what the end of the agenda is. With the Greys, it's pretty obvious that there's a hybrid program. I've witnessed firsthand a fetus been taken from my then girlfriend. One of the most traumatic experiences of everything that I went through, and the women that are out there that's happened to. That's where I got the name of the second book, because it's just so. And I interviewed 3 women in that book that had fetuses taken, and I just feel so sad for them to go through that, because I just witnessed it, and it was just an example.
It's
I went
devastating,
down,
isn't it? Devastating.
It's just devastating. It was hard for me to watch, and they did it, of course, because they monitor our emotions. They put us in a lot of the experiments that they do to us is based on monitoring the human emotions, because they're creating these hybrids. I think it's pretty well known the Greys are pretty void of emotion, and but I believe they're getting these hybrids that are exhibiting these human characteristics. They don't know how to deal with them because of that, and so they continually try to elicit emotion response in us and see how we tick, basically. But so they brought me, and I went in. I repeated the story again in the Baby Takers of that incident, because I had went down to Los Angeles to film a pilot for a show for the Ancient Aliens people, Prometheus. I don't know it may have got shelved. I don't know. But we filmed for 3.5 days down there, and they subjected me to all kinds of experiments. They did a Q for my brain to make sure I wasn't delusional and that I didn't have any kind of brain tumors or something like that. And I passed that with flying colors. And I did a polygraph with one of those world's Joseph, I can never pronounce his last name, Agnagolia or something like that. Very well known. It was on Kennedy's Secret Service detail. Did that. I passed the polygraph, and one of the other things I did was I got regressed for the first time, because when I was in therapy, he didn't know anything about alien abductions, and so he was just trying to help me with my anxiety. agoraphobia. And so they had a lady named Dr. Judy Bloom to do a regression. So, I wouldn't recommend your first regression being filmed with a big film crew and 4 cameras stuck all over the room looking at you. So,
Oh gosh. Oh man, that's a little bit of pressure right there.
it was pressure because I just didn't. I even thought, I asked to talk to her first because first of all, I didn't want this to be tainted, and I said, don't ask any leading questions. Because that was sometimes the rap on Bud Hopkins that that's skeptics. That's what they and I think Bud did good work. I'm not saying that personally, but that's skeptics will say, oh well, these people get it's therapists and they're leading in and thinking that they've had this experience. And so I told her, I was like, because I knew if it ever does get released, that it's going to be on a large scale. I didn't want people saying, oh, that's what happened with that. And so she agreed to do that, and then she said, well, how deep do you want to go? And I didn't know there was different levels, and I was like, she explained it to me, and I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, and sometimes I recommend to people that contact me, if it's affecting their life so much, and they really want answers, this is a way to do it, one of the ways you can do it. So I said, I want to go all in, I don't, that's kind of my nature, I don't do halfway. It's like
Right.
if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all the way. I can't ask other people to do this if I'm not willing to do it myself. So, and I just told her, I said, don't even bring me out unless you think it's like I'm about to have a heart attack or something. It's like just kind of I want answers too, because I don't have all the answers, even for my own case. And so. And I told her also I didn't really think it was going to work, but it did. And as we got going on it, I kind of just walked out. I really kind of forgot about everybody there filming and all the cameras and all that. And one of the things, there was 3 different things that came up, but one of the things that came up, and I'm not surprised because it was me witnessing the fetus being taken. Because it just affected me so much, like so deeply. And I was able to, I'd always blame myself for that. I carried around guilt just for, since the time that it happened. And it was, which was 1988, so it's a long time to carry guilt around. And I just knew, like, if she had never met me, she would have never had to go through this awful experience. And, I was the one that had been taking all this time and stuff. And I just always felt really, really bad about it. And by going through the regression, I relived it again. It was totally just like being there again, not even an observer, just like experiencing it again. I actually remembered more about it, some details that I hadn't remembered before. And the profound thing was, and to show you, to explain to you and your audience, it's like how much this can affect you psychologically. And I didn't even realize at this time, but when I came out of the hypnosis session, everybody was, I realized it then because my face was wet, but I was crying during this session, experiencing that again. It was affecting me. It was so real to be there again. And so here I am, a grown man, and there's like, they told me, it's like, wow, there was like tears coming down my face, and there was like, everybody was just dead silent, the whole crew. So anybody that probably was a non-believer before that, I think it probably changed their mind when they saw that, and, but for me, it was a healing. It was total healing because I remembered more what happened at the end, and I realized that had I been able to, and I do mention this, in the book, that if had I been able to, I was so furious at what was happening, and they had, like, I had never been in an incident where there was so many of them, and they put me on a platform, maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 feet from her, but they left the right side of my table open, and they were surrounding me all around it, everywhere else. And they had her up sort of by a wall with all this equipment and everything. And there was a tall gray who was actually taking the fetus. But they had left the left side of her table open, so I had a clear view of what was going on. And I realized during the time that that brought me for that reason, to monitor my reaction to this. And of course, I got very angry, and I was swearing at him, and I was threatening, and had I been able to break free, I would have taken out as many of them as I could have. I really would have. That's how.
Did they seem shocked by your anger?
No, they don't react hardly to anything. And I turned away, and I refused. Like, I couldn't move anything but my head, and I turned my head, and I was looking straight up, and there was one at the top of the table above my head, and he took his hand down, his long, spindly fingers, and he put it like right over the crown of my head and over the top of my forehead, and he just moved it. And it wasn't from strength, really. It's back to the mind control thing, and he moved my head to the right, forcing me to look, and then I couldn't turn away after that. And so I had to watch everything. And but after the hypnosis session, I remembered some stuff that I was telling her afterwards. And after they had taken the fetus, it was almost like she went into shock. Like she just kind of went numb, and she quit screaming. She was screaming before that. And it was, I felt kind of woozy, actually. They stopped filming, and I felt kind of woozy. It was such an emotional release, because I realized that I was completely helpless to do anything about it, because they have such power of mind control. I mean, there is nothing. I don't care how big you are. I'm a pretty good sized guy. There's nothing you can do.
You're just captive. You're just captive, and you can't do anything to get out of it.
Exactly. And so I realized that I never asked for any of this stuff to happen to me. None of us really do. And so I couldn't blame myself anymore. And it was so therapeutic for me. So whether or not that show ever airs or not, or whatever they decide to do with it, it was still worth going through that experience, the healing process. And that's even why I went public with the books. I wanted to bring more awareness to the reality of what's going on with this, and just how complex that it is. And at the same time, I wanted others out there like me to know that you're not alone. And it was nice to hear you say, that there was stuff that you read in the books that you thought maybe only happened to you, and you found out well it didn't. And that's what happened in Baby Takers. The people that I chose for the interview, part of it's a continuation of my story, and then I actually interviewed 4 other abductees, because we had the congruencies that was just even the most hardened skeptic would have no argument against, because it's stuff that's not the norm. I go into a lot, as you know, I go into a lot of the sexual stuff that happens that most people don't. They don't want to. Even though it's one of the most prominent.
You looked at it all, and that's what made me not be able to put it down.
Yeah. And a lot of it, there's stuff that I wrote about that was embarrassing to me, but I wanted people to know, look, this is the reality of what happened, and I can't be ashamed. I was forced into anything that happened to me, and so. And that's why I want everybody out there that's having these experiences to know also, like, you're not alone. It's really a large scale phenomenon. I mean, it's mind boggling. I mean, there's people that talk about numbers about it. I don't think there's any real data on it. There's different organizations that come up with different conclusions. That's the frustrating part about all this.
I know.
Is dealing with the UFO community at large, because there's so much drama within the community, and quite frankly, there's a lot of ego within the community, and some people are in it for the wrong reasons. I never wrote a book for attention or money. I just wanted the truth to be known, and I wanted to help other people. Mainly, I wanted to help other people. It's like, look, if I can make it through this with with all the stuff that you read about in this book, all these experiences that I had, you can too. I'm just a person like you, and if I can get to a point where contentment and peace, um, then you can too. I just try to be an inspiration for other people, because I've ran across people that's actually committed suicide. In 2015, there was 3 people that I knew of that
Oh gosh.
actually ended up, they couldn't take the anxiety anymore. And the fact knowing that this may never stop, so it's a lot more serious. That's why it really upsets me when you get all these condescending comments and the whole anal probe jokes every single time.
I know. They don't realize that it's mostly, I mean, just about all abductees have some form of post-traumatic stress syndrome. And this means that when they hear a sudden sound, it could be like just opening a can of soda, and that will send them through the roof. Any sudden sound that you and I, regular normal people wouldn't have any issue with, but abductees many times will have the startle reflex. And it's hard to get to sleep at night because you might hear a twig, from a squirrel walking around under your tree, and
Oh yeah.
and you are alert, and your heart's palpitating, and you hear the house settle, make a creak, and you're just like, you just jump to attention. It's hard to explain, but those symptoms, sometimes it can be sexuality. A lot of times abductees don't realize they've had, since they were children, they've been examined sexually, they've been manipulated sexually, they have endured lots of stuff, and they will react in ways of being very promiscuous, you might say, or just have high sex drives.
Yeah,
I've
that's
met
very, very
many
true.
people
Very true.
tell me that, and
Yeah.
it is true, and nobody talks about it, but you do talk about it in your book.
Yeah. And the other thing that people don't realize, the general public, is not only anybody that's taken repeatedly, I guarantee you that there's going to be a faction of the government that's going to take you also. So you're not only just being taken by some alien species. The government wants to know why they're so interested in you. So they may not take you repeatedly, but they're going to take you at some time also and run tests on you and everything else, because A, they want to know what you know, and B, want to know physically, like what is the attraction, what's so unique about you. Um, you know, it does. Genetics plays heavily into it with the grade, and I don't know why. I've just found it over and over again. That seems to be a case, and a lot of times that to keep the gene pool the way that they particularly prefer it. I think this goes back into the mind control stuff. Where they will actually break up relationships and or marriages or whatever in order to tear up certain people uh, to keep the gene pool the way they like it, for their
Well,
donors.
I've heard that too, and I've also heard people talk about Rh negative blood.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do know is there are some specific characteristics of abductees that they seem to all have in common. Many of them. They have high intelligence. They know to think outside of the box. They have their overall, they start out with them young and usually within the family line. So, like you said, they can sort of keep the gene pool going the same. But that is what they do. And who knows? I mean, I think I've spoke with many abductees, of course, and people that I'm thinking, what with the aliens? What with this person? They've just been a whole lot of trouble. They're not very smart, blah, blah, blah. But they seem to, have an agenda. But, the good old United States, they can't let anybody, be on top over them and get knowledge that they don't have. So they sort of emulate the aliens, it seems. Don't you think so?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been getting technology. I mean, for definitely since Roswell. Because I mean, the thing is, the way I always try to explain it is like, okay, however long Homo sapiens has been around, which of course, the Bible says 6,000 years, which we know scientifically is not even close. But let's just say, 30,000, 50,000 years or whatever, from the timeline of bipedal Homo sapiens. And then we went all this thousands of years, and then we were still in horse and buggy, up until, 150 years ago, so, and then all of a sudden, you have this big time scale of evolution, and we only make it up, progress up to that point, and then in a 75 to 100 year period, we go from that to nanotechnology.
That's a big leap.
That's a
Big
huge
leap.
leap. When you look at the overall time scale. So did we just get more intelligent all of a sudden in that short of time span? That goes against evolution. There's no way. And besides that, look around. I don't I don't think we're getting smarter.
Right.
Let me tell you. So,
I know.
man.
The other day I read about something that could, something medically, which seems to be just huge leaps and bounds in the medical field about cures and different things that they're using to stop wounds from bleeding, to help burns. It was some type of apparatus, like a cloth, that they laid over the burn, and within 3 days, even stage 3 burns were healed. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, where did that come from? Things that, like you said, is just a really big leap from even 3 years ago. So you wonder, where is all this information coming from?
And the ironic part about it is, if everybody would have just came clean about this to begin with and say, look, here's this 1 or 2 or 3, however many alien species, and they need us because maybe whatever reason they're a dying race. That's probably the most legitimate theory. They're just interested in us physically. There's nothing else. And we can trade. I mean, if somebody just came to me when I was an adult and said, look, you've got this genetic makeup that this alien species prefers, and they're going to give us all this stuff that helps us, which is technology, and like you're talking about, especially medical stuff, to make our life better and everything. And all they want from you is some sperm and some experiments, and they promise not to kill you. And I would say, okay, I would do it. I would sacrifice that to go through that, to know that it was going to better our existence on this planet. But then it never turned out like that. I don't think I'd be alone in that. I think other people would volunteer. It's like, oh wow, we're going to do this for us and this for us and this for us, or we're going to get this out of it or whatever.
Right, but they're forcing us against our will, not even asking us. And friends don't do that. If humans do it, they get arrested and put in jail.
Yeah, that's why I always have, I got the crowd in the UFO community, it seems to fall with the Space Brother crowd, and then there's people that's angry sort of abductees, and I used to be angry. I'm not anymore. You can probably see the tone change between my first book and the second book, but I think that's a natural thing to do. But I think it's very, very naive to assume on the whole. I don't mean to use the meaning, but this Space Brother crowd, where they're all going to help us and they're going to help our mankind. And my whole thing to those people is like, well, okay, this has been going on for a very long time. When are they going to start helping us? Obviously we're getting the technology like we talked about, but look how they're going about doing it. So if they're really here to save our planet, we got. We're destroying the oceans. We're destroying the planet.
And I look at Fukushima. I mean, we need help with that, definitely.
Yeah, and we can just go on and on. There's famine and extinction of animals at the most rapid pace in history going on right now. So if there are Space Brothers, well then when are they going to start helping? And if you got these people going around saying they're like that they're hybrids and they're themselves, and I'm like, they're, and I do believe that they're probably integrated into our society at this point. Um,
I do too. I do too.
they're not advertising it, trust me. So,
Well, I wanted to ask you, I'm glad that you brought up hybrids because I have these questions all the time from people. Would you, we only have a few minutes left, and I hate this because this is a really good question. Can you tell me how many different kinds of hybrids that you saw on the ship, and which ones seemed the most interesting or the most aggressive?
the I have only, as far as the Greys, I've only witnessed female hybrids, and actually, I was the cover of Children of the Greys was a little girl that was shown to me, brought out by an adult female hybrid, and she made just such a mark on my psyche that I knew that if I ever got enough nerve to come out and go public, I was going to put her on the cover. Um,
Oh, wow.
because and there's some. My brother is an award-winning artist from Las Vegas, Jeffrey Oldham, and he
He
just
did a great job. That's your brother?
yeah, and
Wow.
he just he just did a fantastic job, and so many people have from all over the world have contacted me and said, man, looks similar to kind of little girl I saw, but they've been so drawn to her picture. Um, but I just think that the the females, that for some reason they seem to be creating more hybrid females. I did have an experience with what I would classify, and I try not to be afraid anymore on these experiences, but this time I was, and I know we're out of time, but I go into more detail in Baby Takers about it. But it looked like it was a male creature, and it looked like a combination of a reptilian, a gray, and a human. It was pretty scary to me. It didn't do anything except when it approached me. Um, it leaned over me, the last thing I remember was it came down with its finger, and it sort of had like a flat end on its finger. It wasn't rounded like us, and it actually leaned down and just touched me right, where we signify the third eye, between your eyes and forehead.
Right.
And then I blacked out. Um, but it was new. That was the other odd thing. But I think that they wanted me to see this. It's why it wasn't wearing any kind of uniform, because that's another fallacy. Everybody thinks that the Greys are walking around. They wear uniforms. It's not. I didn't mention this earlier, but I'll get this in real quick. The true aliens is tall Greys. I really think the small Greys are biological robots, and they're just made as workers by the tall Greys.
Yeah, when I read, I think I heard that though in another interview that you did, and I thought I'm not surprised that you came to that conclusion because you painted such a vivid picture of it. In both your books during these encounters, I tell you, people will just have to get in there and read it because of the amount of details that you put in it. But that's the impression that I got, that the taller ones seemed like they were more in charge. But tell me about this / hybrid reptilian looking creature. How tall was it? You said it bent down over you. Was it very tall? And what color was it?
It was a pasty white, and it had sort of a chest plate almost, like an actual reptilian, a reptile. But it wasn't. It was muscular also, and had long arms like the Greys do. But the only reason it was leaning down over me, it only looked out maybe 6 feet tall. I mean, it didn't. It wasn't huge like some people describe actual reptilian creatures. And the reason they had set me up in a scenario, and they do this type of thing, where they'll pull stuff out of your mind, and they'll use it, like all of a sudden you will believe that it's sort of like the hologram thing you see on Star Trek, like where everything would change.
Right.
And except in this case, they use stuff out of your mind in order to do this. And they did experiments like that with me before. And I was being led by two small grays, and then they left, and I was everything changed, and it was almost like I was like out in the clouds or something. It was really weird, and but I saw this old, small, like shack looking place, very out of place, and I thought, oh, here we go. They did enough. You know, this is another mind, yeah, you know, and so I walk in and step up into this place, and there's a guy, a human-looking guy, in the middle of the room, in a chair, an old wooden chair. He's really agitated, and he's like telling me to keep saying, you know, you got to come in, hurry up, they're coming, and I'm like, who's coming? And he goes, you know who? And he's telling me like that kind of stuff, and then I notice there's nothing in this place. And to the left of me, there's this big white bat, like about 2.5, 3 feet deep, large, like not like a normal bathtub or anything like that. You know, it would remind you of something like that. And there was a woman in the fetal position, and she was just sobbing and uncontrollably, and she's all squeezed up in the fetal position. And I thought, I still wasn't falling for any of this stuff. And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to fall for this. This is all just pulled out of my head. It's not real. Because just a minute before this, I've been walking down a hall of what I believe to be a craft, and now I'm in some kind of thing, you know, like they just pulled this out of my head. And in reality, I'm still just standing in this hall. And so I really wasn't playing into it. And then the guy gets up and he goes, I'll try to make this quick, and he gets into this big white bat thing, and he goes down to the end of it with the woman, and he's hunkered down there, and they're really trying to get me scared. And I realized that, once again, you know, that this is the Greys trying to elicit this kind of emotion. I'm going to react to this circumstance. And I wasn't buying it. And so, sort of to pacify them, you know, I decide, okay, I'll play along. I'm going to go get in this bat thing. So I get in, but I stay at the other end. And I'm just thinking to myself, when is this going to end? You know, maybe they'll see I'm not really buying into this time, to it this time. And then I hear something, and here comes this through the door, this hybrid, this male hybrid. And I mean, it shook me up, because I'm like, they didn't pull this from my mind, because I've never seen anything like this before. And I actually hunkered down and kind of walked to the other end with these people, whether they were, you know, I didn't even care at that point whether they were real or not. I was kind of shook up by this thing, and it walks in the middle of the room, and it's just turning and facing us. And you know, I noticed that it was nude, and I thought, this is why is it nude? But of course, I think that they wanted me to get a really, really good look at it, and that's when it approached me. You know, and they, of course, the people were still kind of don't carrying on, and I was scared. You know, I didn't know what this thing was going to do, because it looked.
I was scared reading it. I went and turned on all my lights. I'm not kidding you, and
yeah.
I'm not scared easy.
Well, yeah, I'm not either, but I will freely admit that I was, because I'm like, this thing looked like it had a lot of strength, and it was really a freaky looking creature, and it just didn't look passive, you know, and so when it did like come over me, I was down, you know, crouched up also, with the other two people, and so that's why it leaned over me like that, and I have no idea, other than, you know, that was the last thing I remember of that experience. When I thought about it later, I just think that they wanted to elicit fear, which they accomplished, and I was very upset with myself for letting them do that. There's still a part of me that, you know, tries to resist sometimes. I think it's just basically nature. You know, like, the best thing is to try. My whole thing usually is just to go along with it, survive, and hope that they bring me back. And that's kind of, and as I've gotten older, the experiences are growing less and less, but that's always sort of been the way I go into this when I realize that I'm having an experience. And, and just hope that if it is painful that you don't remember it, not parts of it.
Right. It's not like a vacation like some people think it is. They say, oh, I wish they would abduct me. I wish they would do this.
Yeah.
Well, they need to understand being in the concept of being powerless and having to have unwanted physical tests done to you, sometimes without anesthesia, and sexual things done to you without you having any say-so, and not knowing what or who might be coming in the door. It's a whole new ball game. You don't look at them as, hey, come and get me anymore.
They don't realize the true nature of what's happening. They would never say that. I mean, about a year ago, I woke up with blood out of my left ear, a bruise on my top of my left hand, and on my left hip, some kind of like, I don't even know what it looked like, some kind of like somebody would have gave you a hickey or something on your neck. It was sort of like some kind of big blood on the surface of the skin, all on my left side. And, when that doesn't sound, I don't remember what happened, but it didn't sound like it must have been much fun. So.
I agree with you. Some things you really would rather not know. And I hear a lot of researchers, say, well, go have, total regression, all this kind of stuff. I think Derek Tyler, he wrote Alien Contact, The Difficult Truth. Him, yourself, I think y'all are about it, are the only ones that, say that. But, I agree. Because some things stick in your mind so deeply, you are better off if you can just leave that part out.
Yeah. If you're functioning normally, then I would leave it alone, because it's going to be a lot to swallow, and it keeps coming. Sometimes mine happened. It was almost like a floodgate. And then you go through the denial, then you get into anger, and that's a hard one to let go. And then you start feeling sorry for yourself. You go through all this stuff, and it's a tremendous amount to deal with. The physical stuff heals. It's like the psychological stuff. It takes a long time, and it's constant work.
It's very hard work, and writing a book about it, I tell you, is very therapeutic. And I'm almost done with my second book, and this deals with my family's abductions. There's a part of you that's able, that once that's out there and it's in the light where everybody can see it and grow from it and discover and help heal their pain, it like releases something in you. And it doesn't mean you forget it, but it does help you to make peace with it in some way.
It really does. It's very therapeutic.
Can you tell everybody out there how to get your books? And I guarantee this, if you read one of them, you're going to want to get the other one. But, they're right there close to each other on Amazon. And also quickly, could you tell me if you have any appearances soon anywhere or any future plans for book 3?
I'm actually writing another book now, but it's...
Yay! I'm happy.
Actually, well, it's not alien related. I'm going back. I did a lot of paranormal work. We didn't have time to get into it, but these are closely related, and that's one of the things where I've used my abilities that I came back with as a result from the abductions to be able to help people both on this side and the other side. And I've did a lot of that over the years, and so I got really heavy into EVP work and stuff like that. And I saw that as a way, I was frightened in my youth during all these experiences and stuff, but then I realized, wow, these people are coming to me for a reason. And so I started helping people find closure here and also on the other side. And so the next book is, it's actually called Afterlife Encounters, Ghost Spirits and Indie Bees. And me and my partner are writing it together, and it's a really good look about different aspects of the afterlife, because I think that's a really important subject as well.
Wow. Well, that sounds fascinating because, as a researcher, and I had this happen to me, a lot of abductees have had near-death experiences. And so there's a lot of common things, that go along with abductees and then the paranormal. So I think that will be an awesome book. I can't wait for that to come out.
Yeah, we're making pretty good progress on it, but as you know, it's a long process, a lot of work.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, my books are on Amazon, and hard copy and Kindle versions, and appreciate your having me on the show, um, and I wish you luck with your book. I always applaud anybody that has enough merit to go public with this, because people just have no idea how difficult it is to do that. And
you have to push yourself, don't you, sometimes to just get it from your brain where you've kept it locked away onto the paper. But you know that if you do that, though, that it's going to help you to sleep better, less anxiety. It really is cathartic, and I recommend it, even if it's just writing it down in a journal, or talking to a friend. That's why we do these broadcasts. Yes, it really helps. And I think that's why your books are going to be on the forefront of books by abductees that really, you really delved hard into every aspect of your abduction so that you could help people understand, the complexity of it and what they do to you, just like when you were a child, you had the flashbacks, and even as an adult, you had to deal with the anxiety. And this is what our government does not help us with. We don't even get recognized. That there is no formal treatment plan for abductees, rather than they want to give you lots of drugs and just make you more mind-controlled, like they want you to.
And I do talk about that toward the end of Baby Takers, and I offer a lot of helpful tips to help deal, and things that people can do in order to learn to cope and have some sort of sense of normalcy in your life, because that's very important.
It is very important, and I want to thank you once again for being on my show. I would love to have you come back sometime, and we'll talk about the paranormal stuff, which I totally love too. But I want to urge all our listeners out there, if you've had an experience like this, and you've had missing time or anxiety or can't sleep good at night or strange marks on your body, there's tons of different aspects of being abducted and symptoms that show up. I really encourage you to get his book, Baby Takers and Children of the Greys. I really can't pick. I love both of them. I just go back and forth reading them. But if you will get one of these books, I think it will help parts of your mind that have been locked from your experiences. And that helps us to be better people and to be able to reach out to more people around us. Brett, it has been a pure pleasure to interview you and your books, and I just hope you'll continue your work in the UFO field and the paranormal, and that you'll come back to see us again sometime.
I'd love to. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you having me on, help spreading the awareness.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Notes from the Underground with your host, Deborah Jane East. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook.